Hey, this is Drodio from Founder Culture, and I'm also here with Erica, our Director of Community. Erica is currently making lunch, so Erica, I know that you have your camera off right now, but feel free to join in here. So we're talking to a couple subject matter experts in the Founder Culture community, but specifically Dennis. Dennis is a Chief Privacy Officer at Marapost, and it would be great, Dennis. There's a couple things that I'd love for you to share.
Mhm.
First, a little bit about yourself and your background. But then I'd love to know, what are some of the things that you observe that founders often get wrong? So, like the unknown unknowns, the mistakes that they are making earlier in their company
Mhm.
lives, that if they just knew what you have in your head, they could build much more successful companies.
Yeah, no, that's an easy question, actually. Yeah, so I've been in the digital marketing advertising arena for about 25 years, and as you stated, I've been a chief privacy officer. I was actually sort of around in the mid 90s when it was still dial-up internet access, and
Mhm.
I was probably the only geeky kid on the in the neighborhood that actually had four phone lines coming into his room because I had a bulletin board system actually running on my computer, and that's how I communicated with my friends. So
Nice.
that shows you a little bit far back as to how long I've been kind of working on this, but I've had an opportunity to sort of see technology come into our lives and change it. In terms of sort of like some of the mistakes that I tend to see with a lot of startups, we're all very excited about the products and the ideas that we have, right? We want to get them out there into the mainstream and change the world for whatever reason it is, whether it's a B2C or B2B product. And I think that one of the things that we tend to oversee is sort of that rush into the idea, right?
Mhm.
Again, we're developing, we're hiring outside developers, we're going to be collecting data at some point. But yet, what we're not thinking about is the privacy and security that might have to come along with that product. And again, the data that we're collecting. Today in the world, almost every country today has some sort of privacy law on the books. And as some people may or may not know, even here in the United States, where we do not have federal privacy regulations around data and this sort of stuff that we're getting into, not talking about healthcare data like HIPAA, but
Mhm.
a lot of states are now tired of waiting for the government to sort of step in, and so we're now seeing 4, 5, 6, 10 different states creating a hodgepodge of regulations. And so for startups that are building their company, I think the one thing that they kind of miss is understanding what they are allowed and not allowed to do with that data, right?
Mhm.
Granted, I know that they're not attorneys, right? But simply just sort of understanding what you're about to do with someone's information, how you collect that information. We like to talk about this when Matt and I used to work together at Return Path. We would always talk about, would you do this to your grandmother, right? This data that you're
Mhm.
about to collect, would you share this with a third party that was unknown or sell it? The answer is probably going to be no. And so you begin to sort of think then as a consumer, if I was put in this sort of place, would I be happy about what's about to happen to my data? And so I think it's very important for startups and founders to start thinking about building privacy by design, which is not a term that I coined, but Dr. Ann Kavukian, who was a commissioner in Canada, had coined. And it literally is about building procedures, processes from the ground up. So when you're sitting at that bar and you've got that napkin and you're writing down that idea and you're coming up with the greatest and newest technology to put on our phones, what are you doing around privacy and security? How are you going to secure and keep that data private and put into the control of the consumer that you're about to collect that data from? How are you about to give them control over that data? Right.
Mhm.
And so instead of building the product and being done with it and launching it, a year or two later, and then realizing, oh, I didn't do privacy and security, and then trying to bolt that on at the very end, right? It's like trying to, put an engine in a brand new car when you've built the car around it and then realize it's the wrong engine size, right?
Mhm.
You should be starting with privacy and security as
Mhm.
a part of that development process and building that up. And if you do that, then in the long run, you'll be better off because you will already be ahead of the game in terms of those issues and these new regulations that are out there.
So I think it's safe to say that most founders are not taking a proactive approach to privacy and data, but they're taking a very reactive approach. And what I hear you saying is that gets very expensive later. It's expensive to clean up. It's expensive to deal with the legal and compliance issues that happen later. And I think startups are often especially exposed because it's easy to create a startup that is doing something internationally. A technology
Yep.
platform can be used by anybody, and most startup founders, at least in the US, probably have no idea about GDPR and other things that they should be thinking about. So if I'm a founder and I haven't thought
Mhm.
about this at all, which is what you are saying is often the case, and I am plus 1,000 agreeing with you on. What are one or two things that a founder could do to be more proactive versus reactive about the way that they think about this, or the things that they do first?
Yeah, I think one of the simpler things that you can do is to start with, like, especially when you almost have no budget for this, right? In fact, we're doing a panel tomorrow with an organization called the International Association of Privacy Professionals, and the topic is, hey, you're now the CPO. Now what do you do? And one of the questions that is going to be asked is, all right, you have a very limited budget, right? Like, so, like, if you can't go off and buy platforms and all these tracking technologies or high-powered attorneys to do this, what's the best way to do this? And one of the things that we did, especially with Matt and at Return Path, was we had a buy-in from two levels, if you will. Obviously, the executive level, which was a buy-in from the very top all the way down. Matt was a part of those decisions, and funny enough, I actually made him sign the privacy policy that we would put out there. He actually put a nice statement about how Return Path wants to do everything right, and we find, or we want to give you the power to have over your data, right? We believe in the control of our data. But the second level of that was the buy-in from the employees, and what you'd end up doing. And I originally come out of law enforcement training, actually, believe it or not. You ever see fire engines go down the street, ambulances? You're always going to see somebody who's interested in what's going on, right? I mean, here in the city where I get a chance to volunteer in emergency management, it's amazing how many people show up that are not a part of the emergency, but they want to know what's going on. We find that very similar function actually in privacy and security, that when you involve those that are not at the executive level, but the employees, and you empower them to listen and to hear what's going on when it comes to privacy and security, because you truly do not want to impact their work. Like, I don't want to come in and lay out a policy that stops everything. I want them to have some input to that. And so when, as a founder, you start giving that power to the employees to say, hey, listen, it is on you as a data steward. Like, I am deputizing you, if you will, that as a data steward, as an engineer, as HR, as sales, you will be touching PII or data at some point. And it's up to you to help us make sure that we don't inadvertently misuse that data, or that we, don't, that data doesn't get loose, right? I want to empower you to ask the questions to me about something. So if you see somebody about to do something wrong, or marketing is about to do a new program, but yet you don't feel like they've had a real chance to look at the privacy and security impacts on that, you have the ability to speak up. And once you start deputizing people in that mindset, you'll be shocked and surprised at how quickly, instead of them fearing security, like we used to walk down the halls and they'd be like, oh, here comes the security guy, I'm going that way. No, they actually want to be a part of your team. They actually want to know what's going on, because they are, a part of that. So I think for founders, very simply, is you don't have to buy any major platforms, but if you can get a buy-in from the executive level and from the staff to say, hey, privacy comes first here, right? When it comes to the data that we're collecting, and we want to empower everybody, we want them to be a part of that solution, because everybody is today, in essence, a data steward.
Okay, so I'm gonna repeat back what I'm hearing you say. So if I'm a founder, it's really about creating a culture of privacy by design, of proactive data privacy in the company. It starts with me as the founder, as the executive. Some of the very specific things that I could do is I could attach my name to a privacy policy. So I could show by doing that this matters at our company, which is what Matt did at Return Path. Also, it sounds like just educating my employees on what is PII, what should they be looking out for, and then giving them agency to speak up when they see something happening that maybe there's somebody that isn't being as thoughtful or as careful about it. Is this the kind of thing that you would be willing to come in and do a session on if a founder wants to bring you into their company to do like a half hour session on what does it mean to create a culture of privacy by design? Is that the kind of thing that you would be available for?
Yeah, I do actually. Yeah, in fact, I've been doing a traveling keynote for the last year or two, minus the pandemic, about how the U.S. how the U.S. is changing in terms of the privacy landscape. And it's interesting because I take everybody through an idea of privacy just didn't come on all of a sudden because of these devices that we're carrying around every single day. But privacy has actually been in our lives a lot longer than we know, and it's interesting to enlighten everybody to understand that in your life every day you have privacy decisions. And I already mentioned one, HIPAA, right? But it won't take very long for them to understand that I am doing this almost every day, just in my normal life. And it's important to the company because, again, if we do something wrong, like Matt and Return Path knew that if we did something wrong, we didn't want to be in bad light in PR, right? We also didn't want to be sued by a government agency, and thankfully we never were. But the founders of the company need to protect what they're developing, and if they do that, again, the employees will then also understand that if you do something wrong, it could be that if we lose the company or we lose jobs because we have to pay some major fine, your job could be gone as well, and we don't want that happening. That's why everybody should participate in it. But yeah, I think for 30 minutes, I think we could definitely sit down with most companies and explain to them why this is important.
Yeah, another thing that I'm thinking when I'm hearing you talk is, to the extent that a company can turn this into a competitive differentiator, they're like, most of the world is not being proactive about this yet. And but it's probably true that is the way that the trend line is going, right? It's not like there's going to be, less of this in the future. There's going to be more. And so if a company can be a leader in this and use it as a competitive differentiator to say that we are, really thinking about our users, we are protecting user privacy across every part of our, every department, every part of our product roadmap development process, that could actually be great for recruiting. It could be great for, getting new users, creating more trust and authenticity in the brand. So it sounds like there's a lot of proactive reasons to do this that could be good for the company.
Yeah, I mean,
can I just, that's exactly where I was going. I think you can view it as playing defense, or you can view it as playing offense, or you can view it as both. And I think if you view it as both, you're more likely to weave it into the fabric of the business and the team, and you're more likely to make it a competitive advantage.
Yeah, exactly.
And then one thing I would love to better understand this, and I'm sure many founders would. What exactly are the costs of not doing this? Like I've seen those GDPR fines; they look insane. Are those real? Are companies actually getting hit with those kinds of fines, or like what is the cost of? I mean, beyond obviously like having a breach and that being a big breakage of customer trust, what are some of the other reasons that a founder might want to be proactive about this versus not?
Yeah, it's interesting that they asked that question, but yeah, there are tons of fines that are coming out, and they're continuing to increase, whether it's through the FTC here in America or through any of the data protection authorities in the European Union. Again, the fines are increasing in size and are going to continue that way. But outside of the PR part of it that you just mentioned as well, right, the negativity that comes along with it, right, you could lose consumers. Now, I'll tell you, I didn't stop shopping at Target because they had a data breach, right? I mean, I still have to live my life and buy certain things. But, there are other companies right now in the social media area that I've decided in recent weeks to stop playing on a more daily basis with, because I just don't trust them with my data anymore. But, one of the interesting business impacts that we're starting to see is in the insurance area, right? We are finding that as companies are needing, insurance for the company for whatever reasons that they may have, these policies for data breaches and other things are now separate of your normal director's insurance and other insurance aspects of the company. And actually, you have to buy specific breach insurance or privacy insurance, not just for things that are happening in your company, but also for the third parties or the vendors that you're using. So if you're using, say, an Azure from Microsoft or an Amazon or otherwise, you also have to have specific insurance for them, because those policies take into account the security procedures, the privacy procedures that those companies have instituted for the clients from beginning to end. And if you start to have breach issues, it will be harder and harder for you to even obtain insurance. We've also seen that insurance companies are now asking for what's your breach policy, what's your response policies, all these sorts of things. Like, do you have this stuff in writing? Are you training your staff on an annual basis on privacy, on anti-phishing sort of things, which is something that we also did at Return Path. So the cost will be more if you're not able to prove that, or they may not even insure you, because, to be honest, at this point, insurance companies are just sort of tired of paying for the stupid, if you will. And I don't mean to be bad about that, but if companies don't want to take it seriously, insurance companies are now saying, hey, if we find malfeasance or an employee did something wrong and it was a data loss, we're not going to pay out on it anymore moving forward. So yeah, it can be a loss of fines, it can be PR, but there are other business impacting areas too that are starting to show up.
Yeah, the phishing point is especially interesting. At Armory, I would have every employee listen to this podcast from Reply All called "What Kind of Idiot Gets Fished?" Because these are people in tech that were being fished and not even realizing it, and just the level of sophistication. Like we can all spot the obvious ones. It's the really sophisticated ones that are the problem. I mean, I remember one example from that podcast. I don't remember what URL it was, but it was basically a URL with an SSL cert that was M, and somebody made an RN instead of an M domain with an SSL cert that looked just like an M. And so if you're not careful, if you're not like really careful about it, you're going to fall for that, even if you're a technologist, right? So just educating the company on the exposure. So yes, totally understand why this stuff matters. And thank you for offering to spend some time with some founder culture companies. And it sounds like what I'm really hearing is, if you're early stage, so seed, Series A, be creating a culture of privacy by design. And if you're a scale up company, Series B, Series C, and beyond, then it's all about really implementing a lot of these systems and processes to be able to scale that culture that you've created in ways that work as the company grows.
That's correct.
I'll add one more thing, which is, I think the best thing we did at bigger scale. So once you're past like founder, driving everything, is we actually had, I think we had everybody on our product management team, or if not everybody, then most everybody, actually go through a few of the certifications through IAPP, so that the what's it called, CIPP, right? Certified Information Professional.
Privacy professional.
Everyone, to be a product manager at Return Path, you actually had to be a privacy professional. And that was totally worthwhile. But again, that's bigger scale, right? You've got multiple layers of product management.
Right.
Okay, very helpful. Erica, is there anything else that you'd like to ask Dennis for this AMA?
I mean, I'm also aware of time, so I want there to be enough time for Matt and Audrey as well. But I definitely look forward to your talk, Dennis, and just getting a sense of the lay of the land, because it seems like it's just one security breach after another. So
consumers are tired of it, and now they're asking questions. So
yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much for the expertise, Dennis.
Thank you.